This is CBC Vancouver News.
We know this is a big change, and we appreciate that some people in our community may feel uneasy about being recorded.
Switched on. Some Vancouver police officers are now wearing body cameras. The plans and concerns. Plus,
she's had 8 kids, 15 grandkids, and 5 great-grandkids.
An orca matriarch and pillar of her species is presumed dead after not being seen on the West Coast for almost a year. And
they'll give it a lick, and if they like it, they'll keep licking.
Must you do that? People in northern BC are asked not to let moose lick their cars for salt. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Dozens of Vancouver police officers have switched on body cameras, part of a new pilot project that will allow the department to record interactions with the public. The force says it's trying to raise transparency and trust. But as Michelle Gassoub reports, the technology does have its critics.
Quick double tap. You hear that audio cue. It started recording.
Vancouver police demonstrate what their chest-mounted body cameras will look like and how you'll know they're switched on and recording.
There's a visual cue as well, the red lights on the front, because in the end of the day, this isn't meant for secretive recording. Like, we want the public to know that we're recording. Starting now, 85 traffic and patrol officers will be wearing this hardware. Part of a pilot project they hope will build public trust. Officers will turn the cameras on if they anticipate they'll need to use force to respond to an incident.
Any officer who activates a body-worn camera will inform a person that they're being recorded as soon as possible, unless doing so jeopardizes the safety of an officer or a member of the public.
But the cameras won't be turned on all the time. For example, while at the office filing paperwork, while on patrol, or having a private conversation with a colleague. The VPD has long asked for this equipment, but the cost of the hardware and storing all the footage has been prohibitive until now. That'll change thanks to $20,000 in funding provided by Vancouver City Council.
We know this is a big change, and we appreciate that some people in our community may feel uneasy about being recorded. We understand, too, that some may have questions about how the pilot program is going to work.
Critics of the technology say they're worried about protecting privacy and the potential chilling effect on political protest. And the studies around them have yielded mixed results.
Does the presence of the cameras reduce the police use of force? And 2, does the presence of the cameras reduce civilian complaints? In some circumstances, the presence of the cameras does reduce these 2 things. In other circumstances, though, it's been found in controlled peer-reviewed studies that the presence of the cameras actually increases, so there's an increased police use of force.
The pilot project will run for 6 months and, if successful, will be extended to include all VPD officers. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police in Coquitlam have arrested 2 people after a daytime shooting in a busy area. The RCMP says officers rushed to Johnson Street and Glen Drive just before 3 p.m. after receiving numerous reports that several people had shot at a vehicle and were pointing a gun. There are no reports of injuries. Officers say they arrested 2 suspects and found bullet holes as well as casings. They're asking anyone who witnessed what happened or anyone with dash cam footage to contact them. A 3rd child under 10 years old has now died in BC from complications linked to influenza. The BC Centre for Disease Control says it received a report of the death during the final week of 2023. Last week, the centre reported the deaths of 2 other children, also under 10, also from flu-related illnesses. Health officials say flu cases are rising in BC along with RSV. They're urging more of you to get vaccinated. Flu and COVID shots are free, and people 60 and older can buy an RSV vaccine from some BC pharmacies. You'll soon have a better idea of how much people are actually paying for rent in your city. Rentals.ca is partnering with Statistics Canada to track trends in the rental industry. And together, they're going to release a new rental housing index. Rentals.ca will provide Stats Canada with the data. That agency will then aggregate it and analyze it. Rents are often posted on sites like Craigslist and can vary wildly depending on how long tenants have lived in a building. The new rental housing index is meant to try to make rental rates more transparent. Advocates in the downtown east side are pushing to expand free Wi-Fi in that neighborhood. They say drug users need to have access to life-saving apps like Lifeguard and Brave.
You press a button when you go to use drugs, and then if it won't, like within 75 seconds, if you don't press the button again, it will go straight to an alarm and it will call an ambulance and do GPS tracking to your location.
Right now, there are 521 free public Wi-Fi locations in Vancouver, including in nearby Chinatown and Yaletown. But the downtown east side only has spotty free coverage. Advocates are asking various levels of government and internet providers to expand that free coverage. A well-known drug activist who had his mushroom dispensaries raided in November says he's now mailed samples of illegal drugs to every MLA in BC. Dana Larson says he sent 1 gram of magic mushrooms and a coca leaf for Christmas to show MLAs what he calls the benefits of the substance's medicinal effects.
I wanted to show our elected officials what these things really are. There's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to a coca leaf or a mushroom. And in fact, both these substances have a lot of benefits and a lot of positive uses.
The package also included a user guide and a 2-page letter calling on MLAs to rethink BC drug policies. Eleanor Sturko, the BC United critic for mental health and addiction, called Larson's move inconsiderate. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth has also condemned it. Vancouver outdoor company Arcteryx has won a court battle against Adidas over a very similarly named store in Kitsilano. A BC Supreme Court judge has granted Arcteryx a temporary injunction barring Adidas from using the name Teryx. Teryx opened a year ago, just a few doors down from Arcteryx on West 4th. Arcteryx filed a lawsuit in February claiming that the Adidas store was causing confusion and wrongfully suggesting an association between the brands. Adidas has denied all allegations of trademark infringement. The court judgment says the injunction will expire if Adidas is granted the appropriate trademark registration for Teryx. An orca matriarch, known as one of the most prolific female killer whales on record, is now presumed dead after nearly a year without a sighting on the west coast. As Janella Hamilton reports, researchers say T46 had a massive impact on the growth of transient killer whales.
T46 was a really important member of the transient killer whale community.
Taryn Scarf says T46, or Wake as she was nicknamed, was a matriarch of her pod and had an impressive number of offspring.
She mothered 8 different calves, so 5 females and 3 males. She has over 15 grandchildren from her female calves and already had 5 great-grandchildren during her lifetime. So she produced really greatly to the transient killer whale population, and she made a really positive impact.
T46 was last spotted on February 20th near Alert Bay, an island community off the northeast coast of Vancouver Island. Since then, her family has been seen repeatedly without her.
In the transient killer whale population, individuals will frequently separate from their group and then rejoin at a later point. In the case of T46, she was almost always seen traveling with her 3 sons and her daughter, so for her to not be seen with that grouping is quite rare.
Experts say carcasses of dead whales are located in fewer than 5% of cases.
They don't show up, and there's a good sightings history of their families without them, and then they're presumed deceased. And that's tended to work very well for confirming death.
T46 was first observed in 1976 when she was captured in Puget Sound with 5 other orcas, set to be sold to an aquarium. But the potential sale became the subject of public outcry.
There was a big protest around this event, and as a result, these whales were set free,
sparking an end to the live capture industry in BC and Washington state. Scarf says transient killer whales have been thriving on the west coast, unlike endangered southern resident killer whales, which depend on dwindling Chinook salmon stocks.
Whereas the transients eat mammals, the southern residents primarily will eat Chinook salmon, so a much smaller prey availability for them.
Scarf says while it is always sad to mark the death of any orca, T46 was in her late 50s, the average lifespan for a female killer whale. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
We have a moose-needed reminder from Parks Canada for you. Don't let moose lick your car. People in northern BC have reported the giant animals walking up to their vehicles for a snack.
So they'll lick the salt from the roads, or if your car that's driving up and down those roads, getting it splashed all along the fenders, is collecting it. Moose will come up to cars that are covered in road dirt, grit, and salt, and they'll give it a lick, and if they like it, they'll keep licking.
In the winter, moose are often on the lookout for other sources of salt. In the summer, they can get it from aquatic vegetation. Parks Canada says stopping your car raises the risk of moose being killed or injured by other vehicles, so don't stop if your moose sidles up for a snack. The calendar may say it's winter, but you may not know it with an early burst of spring blooms popping up in some places. The premature sight and scent of some magnolias in Vancouver's West End is especially turning heads.
So today I was at my brother's place, and then I was coming out and I told her to look, there's the flowers already coming out again, and it was weird for me because it's already winter, right? So I didn't expect this, I didn't expect there's a flower.
Living in the West End, the daffodils and the crocuses always come out in January here often, so that's not quite a surprise, but the magnolias and flowers that don't usually come out till April, that is kind of weird. I thought someone was wearing really strong perfume the other day, but there was no one on the street, and I realized that some of the bushes were giving off flower aroma to attract hummingbirds or something like that. And I've noticed the magnolia tree not far from me that the buds are all ready to burst, which is really strange because of course it doesn't happen until March usually.
The magnolia, the white magnolia over there is a Japanese magnolia, and it blooms in the winter. We've already had crocuses come and go. And it's January, right? So, yeah, I don't know what to say. We've got robins everywhere. I'm kind of enjoying it, but at the same time, it makes me very nervous. This is not right. And it's all across the world, I think, climate change. For me, it's also about the insects and the bees, the pollinators, giving them a place to come and have a food source and safety.
Any increases, right? There's enough expenses going on right now.
Get ready for potentially higher cell phone bills. That's next. And thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream tonight. A referee on PEI is hoping her recent debut in the Maritime Junior Hockey League will inspire others to consider officiating. Ellen Dixon says the number of female officials is growing. And as Nancy Russell reports, she'd like to see even more.
This is where Ellen Dixon started officiating. She grew up in the North River Minor Hockey Association and started reffing at the age of 14.
Two goes spread eagle.
This is Ellen Dixon on the ice in Summerside, making her official debut in the Maritime Junior Hockey League, one of 7 female officials in the league.
In some ways, it's funny because it was underwhelming. I was nervous going into it, but at the same time, it's just another game of hockey. It's just about adjusting to the tempo and the speed, because the game wasn't overly intense. It wasn't a very close game, which I think was a great way to get my feet wet in that league. But overall, I was working with a really great crew that have worked that league quite a bit, so it made me feel really comfortable that I was supported by the people I was on the ice with.
Dixon says she hasn't always felt that support, especially when she started reffing games in AAA male leagues across the island.
Certainly, I've had comments based on my gender that I should go back to reffing girls hockey, especially when I started working more elite sport. That was always interesting because I feel, gender doesn't have too much of a say in my ability to skate or my ability to understand and apply a rule. There was certainly some kickback there, but I certainly took it harder when I was younger, but I've developed sort of a water off a duck scenario in that from here on out, yeah.
Now Ellen Dixon wants to support other female officials.
I think there's always going to be concerns just because there's just a lot of intensity in hockey. There's emotions run really high in the rink, things are going to happen, but I think it's just important, especially in the female side, to have that sense of community, that there's people who are going to be there to support them.
The manager of officiating for Hockey PEI says the number of female officials is growing, up 22 this year to almost 60 across the island. Stephen Green says having Ellen Dixon as a role model is making a difference.
Well, I think it gives them a little bit of inspiration, maybe, or maybe helps give them a sense that I can actually do something like this, like this is not out of reach for me. It actually helps the parents, too, realize, that your daughter wants to play hockey, but she can also be an official, too, as well.
Ellen Dixon says her dream is to officiate at a national university championship, and she hopes she can also help others to reach even higher.
Maybe I'll help some girl get to that international level, right? So maybe I think my role there might be more in let's find the next one. It might not be me, but let's find the next one. I'll walk so they can run.
Ellen Dixon also hopes to find a regular spot in the rotation here in the Maritime Junior Hockey League. Every game a chance to inspire more girls to follow in her footsteps. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Cornwall.
Wireless phone plans are about to get more expensive for some Canadians. Rogers says some customers can expect to see price hikes in the coming weeks. And as Anis Haydari reports, Bell is reportedly ready to do the same in February.
The prices Canadians pay to use their mobile phones could be rising. It's not going over well for some.
This is insane because we're already paying for way too much.
Any increases, right? There's enough expenses going on right now.
Horrific. I think this is unacceptable, especially in the current financial crisis.
I can't pay any more for Rogers.
Rogers Communications has confirmed some plans are going up. Customers who aren't on a contract could see price hikes of up to $9 more a month. Marketers say this could be a way to encourage customers to lock in.
So in that way, the customer maybe wins and the telecommunication provider wins in the sense that they're not going to lose the customer.
After its merger with Shaw went through, Rogers' CEO said prices are going to come down. But it's not just Rogers hiking. Some Bell customers have told us their prices are going up too. Bell didn't respond to CBC News questions. While Statistics Canada reports have said mobile service costs have dropped recently, Canadian mobile costs are sometimes ranked as pricier than other countries.
It could be cheaper to go to the US, go to France, get a cell phone there, pay the roaming fee, have an international number in Canada, and that you would pay less after all or overall. So I think that reminds us that we need to do more or be able to think differently about what we're paying for and why we're paying for it.
Rogers has pointed out that it's investing a lot in its networks and that it offers a low-cost $25 plan. But that low-cost plan is only available to some Canadians, such as those on social assistance programs. When the Rogers and Shaw merger was approved, the government said costs should come down or it would take action. But that deal did not appear to include anything to stop Rogers from charging some Canadians $9 extra each month. Anis Haydari, CBC News, Calgary.
Home sales dropped by double digits in Vancouver and Toronto last year. High interest rates and slow housing starts mean the sluggish real estate market could continue into 2024. Mike Crawley has more on what we can expect.
The real estate market in this province right now is in a deep slump. Stats reveal that the number of homes actually selling is far below how many are listed.
That's not to say that supply is overly high in Ontario's market. It's just that sales levels are just so darn low.
We're talking about multi-decade, 20, 24-year lows in individual home sales, like the number of homes sold.
Industry forecasts predict this sluggishness to continue through the first part of the year, at least until there are significant cuts to mortgage rates.
The real question that we're going to be faced with in 2024 is how fast will interest rates decline, how quickly.
Another trend to watch for as the new year unfolds, whether sellers will get nervous and start asking for less.
It's a combination of these high prices and high interest rates that is keeping a lot of buyers out of the market right now.
The condo sector is in particularly bad shape, especially the pre-sale market dominated by investors.
Over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll probably see more investors unloading properties just because they can't afford to have, so much debt at today's interest rates.
Those interest rates are also dampening the pace of new home construction because developers face higher financing costs. Throw in pricier building materials and a labor crunch, it's all dragging the Ford government further off track of its target for 1.5 million new homes by 2031.
Canada-wide and Ontario, of course, we're expecting housing starts to fall in 2024, so the pace of housing starts will kind of come off.
We need more housing supply, but supply's declining when we need it, and our population continues to boom.
Huge increase in population, ongoing increase in population, and reduced housing starts. It's a recipe for disaster.
Meanwhile, cities around the province have given the green light to housing projects totaling tens of thousands of new homes. Yet when you get a peek behind the billboards, construction is yet to begin. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Mississauga.
As we told you earlier in the show, BC health officials say respiratory illnesses are rising in BC. Health Canada has now approved a new vaccine that can protect infants against RSV. Caroline Dunn shows us more on how it might be rolled out across the country.
The new RSV vaccine, Abrezvo, is already in production and in demand globally. Now it's approved for use in this country.
It was tested in pregnant people and it was found to be safe.
A Canadian first, it's to be given to individuals who are 32 to 36 weeks pregnant. The antibodies are transferred through the placenta, meaning newborns are protected from birth to 6 months.
It has been shown to reduce the risk of RSV hospitalization in infants during the first 6 months of life by almost 60%.
That holds promise to help ease a healthcare system routinely overwhelmed by pediatric RSV. It's a highly contagious respiratory illness that can have severe symptoms, especially in young children and seniors. The new vaccine is also approved for use in people over 60, the second to get the green light from Health Canada for that use.
The head's going to go right there.
While approved, the vaccine is not yet available to patients in Canada, and there are still no official recommendations for its use here either. Pfizer says it's committed to bringing a supply to Canada as quickly as possible, but that means negotiating those recommendations with a federal agency and with the provinces about whether there will be a cost to patients. All said, it won't likely be available until at least next fall.
If you want to reduce its burden, you need to have widespread vaccination at the population level anyway. And so that's an ongoing conversation that we'll need to have with the public.
Its success, say doctors, will depend on uptake. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
There's BC Place from earlier tonight marking National Ribbon Skirt Day, a day to encourage Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ people to wear traditional regalia. Darius's BC-wide weather forecast is next.
My name is Akane Shiga.
At 22 years old, Akane Shiga is the youngest player in the PWHL. She's also the only player from Japan, a country that's women's team has never finished higher than 6th in the Olympics, making the forward's leap and debut in the North American Pro League that much more remarkable.
I started playing hockey outside, just kind of like pond hockey style, and then just kept playing, and I had ambitions to play overseas eventually. So when the opportunity came to try out for Ottawa, it was a no-brainer.
Akane Shiga already with a couple chances so far. Moving to a new country and learning a new language has been a big change, but she says the transition to Ottawa has been easier than expected.
Obviously still learning English, and there's a long way to go, just with help from everyone else and the teammates being very thoughtful of the language barriers, and they're using just simple vocabs and easy sentences, so I think the communication part's been better than I expected.
Ottawa's head coach's hockey background also helps. Carla McLeod was the assistant coach for the national team in the 2014 Sochi Olympics. As for how well she can speak Japanese,
it's mama, which means so. So I've certainly spent a lot of time there, have enough words that I can
randomly speak some Japanese to Akane, and she just shakes her head and smiles because she knows I'm just being kind of a dork.
Overall, the language barrier hasn't been a major setback on the ice or with the team.
At the end of the day, the language that I'll speak is hockey, and she's a very good young hockey player.
With only one game under her belt, she's already gaining fans in Ottawa, including the ambassador of Japan to Canada.
The woman, just on her own, coming to Ottawa, becoming the big player, that she can change the world.
Last night's sold-out home opener marks a solid start for the women's new pro league. And to Coach McLeod, this season is bigger than winning or losing. It's about what the league means to young athletes, no matter where they're from.
You know, the dream's now available to all of us. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. It doesn't matter if you're from Canada, US, or Japan, or Czech, or Germany, or Hungary. You have opportunities in our game.
A total of 24 games each this season. Playoffs take place early May. Celeste Kerr, CBC News, Ottawa.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
He's back. Science and climate specialist Darius Mahdavi has returned with our BC-wide forecast, and you have some interesting information about how warm December was.
Yes, record-breaking temperatures across Canada. It does seem like it was the warmest December on record across BC, and here in Vancouver, it was no exception. So take a closer look because it's a little bit hard to see on the monitor, but you can see here that looking at the last 30 days across the last 60 or so years, we had far and away the warmest period on record. So this is over 3.5 degrees warmer than the average over the last 30 years. So this is record-breaking temperatures, again, seen not just here in Vancouver, but across parts of the South Coast, where we had in the top 5 warmest Decembers across many weather stations and across the province. So fortunately, that is looking to change. Looks like El Nino losing its grip a little bit as a polar vortex sets up and starts to push some Arctic air down our way. And as we start to see temperatures drop across the province over the next few days, it's really just a glimpse of what is to come over the next couple weeks, as temperatures are expected to continue to drop as we continue to see this Arctic air move down. And so that could be good news for some of the local mountains, as we'll see later, expecting some snow there. But here you can see that we have another few systems rolling through, so not too much change besides the temperature, because we've got lots more precipitation on the way. And then these systems, once they hit Vancouver and the rest of the South Coast, will continue to push into the interior, bring plenty of snowfall there as well. So lots of excitement. I wouldn't count on traveling too much in the early weekend if you're going through any of the mountain passes, because it will be a little bit difficult, but a high pressure system sets up late in the weekend, very temporarily, late Saturday into Sunday, so you get a little bit of a reprieve then. Now, if we take a look at our accumulation map, you can see plenty of rain and snowfall coming to some areas, but nothing too concerning. We don't have to worry really about any warnings, it seems, so far, except potentially some travel advisories in place in the interior. I wouldn't expect too much here on the South Coast, although there is quite a bit of rain coming to some places. In terms of conditions, not looking too bad tomorrow. Again, some precipitation activity, but nothing concerning. If we take a look at zooming into here in Vancouver, you can see that we are expecting to get some snowfall for the local mountains over the next couple nights, because temperatures are expected to come down and freezing levels are expected to come down, which we can see here in our 5-day forecast. I've spelled out the freezing levels here, 800 meters down to 500, down to 200 on Sunday. Start to come up a little bit more, but these are the daily high freezing levels, so they will be even lower overnight. So expect plenty of rain, even some snowfall potentially early next week, but we'll take a closer look at that probably tomorrow.
Sounds good. Good to have you back, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
And that is your late news for Thursday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news at any hour, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That begins tomorrow morning at 5:30. Have a good night.